The Battle of Salamis was a naval battle fought between an alliance of Greek city-states under Themistocles and the Persian Empire under King Xerxes in 480 BC, which resulted in a decisive victory for the outnumbered Greeks. The battle was fought in the straits between the mainland and Salamis, an island in the Saronic Gulf near Athens, and marked the high point of the Second Persian invasion of Greece. To block the Persian advance, a small force of Greeks blocked the pass of Thermopylae, while an Athenian-dominated allied navy engaged the Persian fleet in the nearby Straits of Artemisium. In the resulting Battle of Thermopylae, the rearguard of the Greek force was annihilated, whilst in the Battle of Artemisium the Greeks had heavy losses and retreated after the loss at Thermopylae. This allowed the Persians to conquer Boeotia and Attica. The Allies prepared to defend the Isthmus of Corinth whilst the fleet was withdrawn to nearby Salamis Island. Although heavily outnumbered, the Greek allies were persuaded by the Athenian general Themistocles to bring the Persian fleet to battle again, in the hope that a victory would prevent naval operations against the Peloponnesus. The Persian king Xerxes was also eager for a decisive battle. As a result of subterfuge on the part of Themistocles, the Persian navy sailed into the Straits of Salamis and tried to block both entrances. Seizing the opportunity, the Greek fleet formed in line and scored a decisive victory. Xerxes then retreated to Asia with much of his army, leaving Mardonius to complete the conquest of Greece. However, the following year, the remainder of the Persian army was decisively beaten at the Battle of Plataea and the Persian navy at the Battle of Mycale. Afterwards, the Persians made no more attempts to conquer the Greek mainland. These battles of Salamis and Plataea thus mark a turning point in the course of the Greco-Persian Wars as a whole. From then onward, the Greek police would take the offensive. A number of historians believe that a Persian victory would have hamstrung the development of ancient Greece, and by extension Western civilization, and this has led them to claim that Salamis is one of the most significant battles in human history. Background: the Greek city-states of Athens and Eretria had supported the unsuccessful Ionian revolt against the Persian Empire of Darius I in 499–494 BC, led by the satrap of Miletus, Aristagoras. The Persian Empire was still relatively young, and prone to revolts amongst its subject peoples. Moreover, Darius was a usurper, and had spent considerable time extinguishing revolts against his rule. The Ionian revolt threatened the integrity of his empire, and Darius thus vowed to punish those involved. Darius also saw the opportunity to expand his empire into the fractious world of ancient Greece. A preliminary expedition under Mardonius, in 492 BC, to secure the land approaches to Greece ended with the reconquest of Thrace and forced Macedon to become a client kingdom of Persia. In 491 BC, Darius sent emissaries to all the Greek city-states, asking for a gift of earth and water, in token of their submission to him. Having had a demonstration of his power the previous year, the majority of Greek cities duly obliged. In Athens, however, the ambassadors were put on trial and then executed. In Sparta, they were simply thrown down a well. This meant that Sparta was also now effectively at war with Persia. Darius thus put together an amphibious task force under Datis and Artaphernes in 490 BC, which attacked Naxos, before receiving the submission of the other Cycladic islands. The task force then moved on Eretria, which it besieged and destroyed. Finally, it moved to attack Athens, landing at the Bay of Marathon, where it was met by a heavily outnumbered Athenian army. At the ensuing Battle of Marathon, the Athenians won a remarkable victory, which resulted in the withdrawal of the Persian army to Asia. Darius therefore began raising a huge new army with which he meant to completely subjugate Greece. However, in 486 BC, his Egyptian subjects revolted, indefinitely postponing any Greek expedition. Darius then died whilst preparing to march on Egypt, and the throne of Persia passed to his son Xerxes I. Xerxes crushed the Egyptian revolt, and very quickly restarted the preparations for the invasion of Greece. Since this was to be a full-scale invasion, it required long-term planning, stockpiling and conscription. Xerxes decided that the Hellespont would be bridged to allow his army to cross to Europe, and that a canal should be dug across the Isthmus of Mount Athos. These were both feats of exceptional ambition, which would have been beyond any contemporary state. By early 480 BC, the preparations were complete, and the army which Xerxes had mustered at Sardis marched towards Europe, crossing the Hellespont on 2 pontoon bridges. The Athenians had also been preparing for war with the Persians since the mid-480s BC, and in 482 BC the decision was taken, under the guidance of the Athenian politician Themistocles, to build a massive fleet of triremes that would be necessary for the Greeks to fight the Persians. However, the Athenians did not have the manpower to fight on land and sea, and therefore combating the Persians would require an alliance of Greek city-states. In 481 BC, Xerxes sent ambassadors around Greece asking for earth and water, but made the very deliberate omission of Athens and Sparta. Support thus began to coalesce around these two leading states. A congress of city-states met at Corinth in late autumn of 481 BC, and a confederate alliance of Greek city-states was formed. It had the power to send envoys asking for assistance and to dispatch troops from the member states to defensive points after joint consultation. This was remarkable for the disjointed Greek world, especially since many of the city-states in attendance were still technically at war with each other. Initially the Congress agreed to defend the narrow Vale of Tempe, on the borders of Thessaly, and thereby block Xerxes' advance. However, once there, they were warned by Alexander I of Macedon that the Vale could be bypassed through the pass by the modern village of Sarantoporo, and that the army of Xerxes was overwhelming. The Greeks retreated. Shortly afterwards, they received the news that Xerxes had crossed the Hellespont. A second strategy was therefore adopted by the Allies. The route to southern Greece would require the army of Xerxes to travel through the very narrow pass of Thermopylae. This could easily be blocked by the Greek hoplites, despite the overwhelming numbers of Persians. Furthermore, to prevent the Persians bypassing Thermopylae by sea, the Athenian and allied navies could block the Straits of Artemisium. This dual strategy was adopted by the Congress. However, the Peloponnesian cities made fallback plans to defend the Isthmus of Corinth should it come to it, whilst the women and children of Athens had been evacuated en masse to the Peloponnesian city of Troezen. Famously, the much smaller Greek army held the pass of Thermopylae against the Persians for 3 days before being outflanked by a mountain path. Much of the Greek army retreated, before the Spartans and Thespians who had continued to block the pass were surrounded and killed. The simultaneous Battle of Artemisium was up to that point a stalemate. However, when news of Thermopylae reached them, the Allied fleet also retreated, since holding the Straits of Artemisium was now a moot point. Prelude. The Allied fleet now sailed from Artemisium to Salamis to assist with the final evacuation of Athens. En route, Themistocles left inscriptions addressed to the Ionian Greek crews of the Persian fleet on all springs of water that they might stop it, asking them to defect to the Allied cause. Following Thermopylae, the Persian army proceeded to burn and sack the Boeotian cities that had not surrendered, Plataea and Thespia, before marching on the now evacuated city of Athens. The Allies prepared to defend the Isthmus of Corinth, demolishing the single road that led through it, and building a wall across it. This strategy was flawed, however, unless the Allied fleet was able to prevent the Persian fleet from transporting troops across the Saronic Gulf. In a council of war called once the evacuation of Athens was complete, the Corinthian naval commander Adiamentus argued that the fleet should assemble off the coast of the isthmus in order to achieve such a blockade. However, Themistocles argued in favor of an offensive strategy, aimed at decisively destroying the Persians' naval superiority. He drew on the lessons of Artemisium, pointing out that battle in close conditions works to our advantage. He eventually won through, and the Allied navy remained off the coast of Salamis. The timeline for Salamis is difficult to establish with ever certainty. Herodotus presents the battle as though it occurred directly after the capture of Athens, but nowhere explicitly states as much. If Thermopylae, Artemisium occurred in September, then this may be the case. But it is probably more likely that the Persians spent 2 or 3 weeks capturing Athens, refitting the fleet, and resupplying. Clearly though, at some point after capturing Athens, Xerxes held a council of war with the Persian fleet. Herodotus says this occurred at Phalerum. Artemisia, queen of Halicarnassus and commander of its naval squadron in Xerxes's fleet, tried to convince him to wait for the Allies to surrender, believing that battle in the Straits of Salamis was an unnecessary risk. Nevertheless, Xerxes and his chief advisor Mardonius pressed for an attack. It is difficult to explain exactly what eventually brought about the battle, assuming that neither side simply attacked without forethought. Clearly though, at some point just before the battle, new information began to reach Xerxes of rifts in the Allied command. The Peloponnesians wished to evacuate from Salamis while they still could. This alleged rift amongst the Allies may have simply been a ruse, in order to lure the Persians to battle. Alternatively, this change in attitude amongst the Allies may have been in response to Persian offensive maneuvers. Possibly, a Persian army had been sent to march against the isthmus in order to test the nerve of the fleet. Either way, when Xerxes received this news, he ordered his fleet to go out on patrol off the coast Salamis, blocking the southern exit. Then, at dusk, he ordered them to withdraw, possibly in order to tempt the Allies into a hasty evacuation. That evening Themistocles now attempted what appears to have been a spectacularly successful use of disinformation. He sent a servant, Sisinus, to Xerxes, with a message proclaiming that Themistocles was on the king's side and prefers that your affairs prevail, not the Hellenes. Themistocles claimed that the Allied command was infighting, that the Peloponnesians were planning to evacuate that very night, and that to gain victory all the Persians need to do was to block the straits. In performing this subterfuge, Themistocles seems to have been trying to bring about exactly the opposite, to lure the Persian fleet into the straits. This was exactly the kind of news that Xerxes wanted to hear, that the Athenians might be willing to submit to him, and that he would be able to destroy the rest of the Allied fleet. Xerxes evidently took the bait, and the Persian fleet was sent out that evening to effect this block. Xerxes ordered a throne to be set up on the slopes of Mount Aigaleo, in order to watch the battle from a clear vantage point, and so as to record the names of commanders who performed particularly well. According to Herodotus, the Allies spent the evening heatedly debating their course of action. The Peloponnesians were in favor of evacuating, and at this point Themistocles attempted his ruse with Xerxes. It was only when Aristides, the exiled Athenian general, arrived that night, followed by some deserters from the Persians, with news of the deployment of the Persian fleet, that the Peloponnesians accepted that they could not escape, and so would fight. However, Peloponnesians may have been party to Themistocles' stratagem, so serenely did they accept that they would now have to fight at Salamis. The Allied navy was thus able to prepare properly for battle the forthcoming day, whilst the Persians spent the night fruitlessly at sea, searching for the alleged Greek evacuation. The next morning, the Persians sailed into the straits to attack the Greek fleet. It is not clear when, why or how this decision was made, but it is clear that they did take the battle to the Allies. The opposing forces. The Greek fleet. Herodotus reports that there were 378 triremes in the Allied fleet, and then breaks the numbers down by city-state. However, his numbers for the individual contingents only add up to 371. He does not explicitly say that all 378 fought at Salamis, and he also says that the Aeginetans had other manned ships, but they guarded their own land with these and fought at Salamis with the 30 most seaworthy. Thus it has been supposed that the difference between the numbers is accounted for a garrison of 12 ships left at Aegina. According to Herodotus, 2 more ships defected from the Persians to the Greeks, 1 before Artemisium and 1 before Salamis, so the total complement at Salamis would have been 373. According to the Athenian playwright Aeschylus, who actually fought at Salamis, the Greek fleet numbered 310 triremes. Ctesias claims that the Athenian fleet numbered only 110 triremes, which ties in with Aeschylus's numbers. According to Hyperides, the Greek fleet numbered only 220. The fleet was effectively under the command of Themistocles, but nominally led by the Spartan nobleman Eurybiades, as had been agreed at the Congress in 481 BC. Although Themistocles had tried to claim leadership of the fleet, the other city-states with navies objected, and so Sparta was given command of the fleet as a compromise. Plain numbers represent triremes, those indicated in parentheses are pentacontas. The Persian fleet. According to Herodotus, the Persian fleet initially numbered 1,207 triremes. However, by his reckoning they lost approximately a third of these ships in a storm off the coast of Magnesia, 200 more in a storm off the coast of Euboea, and at least 50 ships to Allied action at the Battle of Artemisium. Aeschylus, who fought at Salamis, also claims that he faced 1,207 warships there, of which 207 were fast ships. Diodorus and Lysias independently claim there were 1,200 ships in the Persian fleet assembled at Doriscos in the spring of 480 BC. The number of 1,207 is also given by Ephorus, while his teacher Isocrates claims there were 1,300 at Doriscos and 1,200 at Salamis. Ctesias gives another number, 1,000 ships, while Plato, speaking in general terms, refers to 1,000 ships and more. The number 1,207 appears very early in the historical record, and the Greeks appear to have genuinely believed they faced that many ships, because of the consistency in the ancient sources. Some modern historians are inclined to accept 1,207 as the size of the initial Persian fleet, others reject this number, with 1,207 being seen as more of a reference to the combined Greek fleet in the Iliad, and generally claim that the Persians could have launched no more than around 600 warships into the Aegean. However, very few appear to accept that there were this many ships at Salamis. Most favor a number in the range 600 to 800. This is also the range given by adding the approximate number of Persian ships after Artemisium to the reinforcements quantified by Herodotus.